the month of May started with the second part of the $150 million download celebration. It brought back the Battle of Gods story event with some new Dokkan awakenings, the potential orb events were available daily, which was huge at the time, you already know how scarce those orbs were, a new story event with a new farmable free-to-play unit, and most importantly, the World Tournament God was finally out on JP, Strength LR Broly. I say finally because this guy was actually a global first. The first global first ever, I think. Nonetheless, as for the new units and awakenings, Tech Whis was actually a decent awakening. He lowered attack on both his super attack and passive, while having a 50% chance of stunning the attacked enemy for 1 turn, so a pretty decent debuffer. He also shared 2 key links with Tech Paikuhan, another debuffer, so if the enemy could have his attack lowered, those two together were actually a pretty nasty rotation. In Super Saiyan God Goku was also pretty decent, like they didn't give him much, but they improved his biggest weakness, which was the restriction on his passive. It went from 50 to 30% HP, which was huge. The only problem is that he got Shattering the Limit instead of Fierce Battle. Like, he didn't really need the key, since he had Over in a flash and could be ran on Gojida's team. Like, the attack from Fierce Battle would have just been way better, but he was still a decent unit. Int Whis was also very good. He now gave 2 key to all allies alongside his super type buff, which I don't even have to explain to you why it was so much better than just giving stats to all allies. The key really makes a difference. Also, this guy got 2 new links, both of them being key links, something that he desperately needed, because as a UR, the only link he had was Gentleman, which wasn't the most common link as you already know. So you now had 2 great Whis you could pick from, the Tech one who was a debuffer and the Int one who was a support type unit. The free-to-play physical God Goku also got quite the upgrade. His SA multiplier went from extreme to supreme, he now gave key to physical and strength type units alongside the stat buffs, and he got 2 new links. Very good links actually, the Saiyan Lineage and Fierce Battle, which bothered people at the time because they couldn't understand why they gave Fierce Battle to the free-to-play unit instead of the summonable Int one, but I guess things had to be balanced. The Int one would have probably been too good with Fierce Battle.
Okay. This is not a drill.
Today we got something interesting and global that blew all of us away. Nobody saw this coming in a million years. We got something exclusive that's only on global right now.
Legendary Summon is now on, guys.
I don't know what's going on right now. I can't even do my proper introduction. What is this?
It's Broly.
LR Broly.
Legendary Summon LR Broly!
Legendary Summon SSR Broly can become an LR through Dokkan Awakening.
And he's summonable and he's a featured unit, meaning his rates is about the same as any other featured unit that comes out in every single banner.
What?
Now as for LR Strength Broly, that guy was just a monster. Just like the other summonable LRs, he pretty much just got the whole game. His leader skill was pretty decent, since you were now able to run one of the best tank in the game, Strength Janemba, and one of the hardest hidden TUR, Strength Super Saiyan 4 Goku, on the same team. Like, it wasn't anything crazy, but it was still like a very cool thing to do. Like, his leader skill was probably the least impressive thing about that guy. He had an AoE as his 12th key, an insane AD 1000 attack buff on super, and an additional super attack as long as you were able to at least super once with him. And you already know where I'm going with this. That guy was just a World Tournament monster. His flat stat buff meant that his stats weren't affected as much by the lack of a second leader in the World Tournament. The fact that his AoE was on his 12th key meant that you were able to AoE super quite consistently with him, but most and foremost, that guy could super twice, meaning that he absolutely cleared in the World Tournament. Thanks to him, people were finally able to beat those high World Tournament stages with ease. But it's true that just like his Dokkan Fest counterpart, that guy lowered his defense on super, but he just did so much more damage that it wasn't as much of an issue. Like, excluding some Dokkan events, I'm pretty sure nothing in the game could survive 2 supers from that guy. Talking about his Dokkan Fest counterpart, people were mad that LR Strength Broly was just a straight up upgrade from the Dokkan Fest. Like, he had the same kit, just better. And that meant that if you pulled the LR, the Dokkan Fest was now completely useless, since not only did they share the same name, they also shared the same type, and this was before the same name update, so you couldn't run them both on the same team. Some people went even as far as to say that the Dokkan Fest should have Dokkan awakened into the LR. Like, that's crazy. There was no way in hell they were going to do that, especially with Toshi as the game producer. But hey, at least his super attack was farmable, and they did give him his own banner, because yes, Broly was the first summonable LR to be featured on a banner, so this was also the first ever legendary banner on JP, and bro, it was bad. 14 featured units with no guaranteed SSR. You can already guess that the rates were absolutely horrendous. Obviously better than the other LRs that were unfeatured, but still very bad. But I don't know what was worse, his rates or the fact that you needed 97 million Zenny to awaken him into an LR. Like, sure, nowadays Zenny isn't really that much of an issue, but back then things were different. I remember pulling this guy like a year or two later and having to farm Zenny, like a lot of Zenny, and this was post Easy Is. I can't even fathom how hard it would have been at the time without Easy Is. Your best bet was probably one of those GT events, like just farm those medals and exchange them for the Zenny status in the Baba shop. Anyways, the next day they dropped a new Goku Jr., the first unit that could be farmed entirely for free, meaning you didn't even need to invest potential orbs into this guy. His event came with his own farmable potential orbs, also meant that if you wanted to rainbow this guy, you had to farm his orbs, and that was not fun. I remember because I actually farmed him when I first started playing the game back in 2018. You needed about 6,000 small orbs, 3,000 medium orbs, and 300 big orbs to rainbow that guy, and each run gave you at best like around 100 small orbs, 60 medium orbs, or like a couple of big orbs depending on the path you chose. The big orbs were obviously the easiest to farm, but the small and medium orbs, bro, they just took forever. You had to run the event like 60 times, which actually, now that I think about it, wasn't that bad, but I guess the farming part of the game really improved the following year, so for me that was like a horrendous grind at the time. His drop rate was also bad, even for the time being. I wouldn't even be surprised if you had like a 1% chance of dropping him, hence why his missions gave you 12 copies. Nonetheless, the important part is, was this guy good? Well, yes, he was. He was one of the best free-to-play units at the time. That supreme damage multiplier coupled with his 40% start of turn attack buff, that was actually an 80% attack buff most of the times, made this guy hit hard and quite consistently. And since defense wasn't as important at the time, unless you literally lowered your defense to 0 like Dokkan Fest Strength Broly, that minus 40% defense on Super wasn't that much of a problem. Surprisingly, at the same time, GP got more top grossing rewards. Like, that was crazy. In the span of like 3 weeks, GP got top grossing rewards thrice. I don't even understand how did people still have money for Broly after Super Gogeta, but yeah, they just gave orbs and Elder Kais, so no stones unfortunately. The next day they also gave players some items that would have helped them awaken and train Goku Jr., like Zenny, awakening medals, and training items. So that guy was actually really just free. The next week they released a second Dokkan Battlefield, with obviously a lot of changes, mostly related to the difficulty of the event.
What's going on, everyone? Talon back here, and today, well, it has finally returned after 3 months. Few changes that I know of. For the most part, it's still the same game mode, but a few changes on the outside, I guess, technically. So if you go into here, and basically it's going to tell you that you can only play once a day. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, wait a minute. We get to play 3 times a day last time, and it took forever just to get something like 7 medals that if you save them, like Rhymestone with this LR Gohan that you just got. So that must mean, A, they either make it easier, and that means you can get more, you know, of the, I guess, battlefield gems essentially, or basically you get more per round and, you know, more bonuses, kind of things like that, which is, I guess, with the case. They've changed some of the missions as well. They don't have orbs in there now. They have stones instead. They restocked the Baba shop to use those points. Both androids now, Android 13, the Tech and the Intel one, can be awakened.
Now, as for the 2 new awakenings that came with this battlefield, Tech Android 13 was actually pretty good for a free-to-play unit. He had a supreme damage multiplier and 4 ki and 70% attack when his ki was 8 or more. So you only needed 2 ki to super with that guy. He was like the extreme class version of Int Ultimate Gohan. The only problem though is that his grind was absolutely horrendous, like I explained previously. Int Android 13 was also pretty good. He now had a supreme damage multiplier, lower defense on Super, which alone wasn't as good, but combined with his leader skill, he was very good against tech type enemies. He also did help out Kid Buu quite a bit with his orb changing ability, and did some decent damage with his 50% start of turn attack buff. But yeah, you'll hear more about this guy later on, simply because of his leader skill. You could choose so many events with it, as you'll see. Nonetheless, a couple of days later, we got a new batch of monotype supports. Tech Tien was very good. He lowered attack on super, was tech, and had the over and a flash key link. So you already know that this guy was a monster on AGL's per Sentry Goku's team. Even though you weren't able to get Gotenks 11 key with him on rotation, the support type buff compensated for the overflowing key, which is actually a crazy thing to say. But as you'll see later on, the amount of key that guy gave helped him tremendously in the future. Tech Cell on the other hand was not as good. Like, he wasn't bad per se, but he just didn't have any crazy synergies at the time. Tech Cell wasn't all that anymore. Plus, they only shared like 3 links together, with one of them being Messenger from the future. Bro, that link sucked at the time. And the Extreme Tech Neogas leader also wasn't out yet, and you weren't running this guy on like Gotenks team. The next week, it was already time for a new campaign. A character strengthening campaign. I guess it was time for something like that after all the crazy units they dropped since the beginning of the year. So for that campaign, the potential orbs event got buffed, like you had a higher chance of seeing a secret character, so potentially more potential orbs. You were also given potential orbs, dragon stones, and training items every day until the end of the month, and both the Master Roshi and Mr. Satan event got buffed. The same buff they got during the anniversary, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, that was pretty good. Another couple of days later, they dropped yet again another batch of support type units. Kid Gohan was good. He raised his attack by 50% on super for 6 turns, one of the best super attack effect you could have at the time. But the problem is that his link set was pretty bad, so he didn't link quite well with Super Gogeta. His support still helped tremendously, so just for that he probably was still a must run on Gogeta's team. Vegeta was also good. He had a 20% chance of stunning the enemy on super, so another type stunner, but you already know how much Kid Buu struggled for ki. So the fact that this guy gave 3 ki to type units helped Kid Buu so much. He was literally a must-have on Kid Buu's team if you wanted the team to somewhat work. One thing worth pointing out about their banners is that LR Super Saiyan Gohan was there unfeatured, and looking at the amount of unfeatured units, the chances of you pulling him were probably higher on that banner than the double race banner he was initially on. So yeah, a lot of people summoned just for him. The next day, we got another world tournament. The first world tournament since the release of LR Broly. The new world tournament trophy card was actually pretty decent. Tech Mr. Buu had a supreme damage multiplier, lowered attack on super, and was a rainbow orb changer that could also heal from rainbow key spheres obtained. So a very good unit to run on Angel Super Sentry Goku's team. Thanks to his rainbow orb changing ability, Goku could now dish out some very impressive numbers more consistently. As for the new awakenings, AGL Bardock was pretty good. Greatly raised attack on super for 1 turn, gave 2 ki and 30% attack to AGL and strength type units, so yeah, honestly a decent unit to run on AGL's percent for Vegeta's team. Tech GT's percent Vegeta was also decent. He raised his defense by 30% for 6 turns on super, and gained 90% attack below 99% HP, which was pretty much all the time. And since he had so many killings, supering with him was never an issue. So yeah, that guy was good. Tech Turles was not as good on the other hand, but still good. He had a 50% chance of stunning the attacked enemy on super, and gained 3 ki and 60% attack and defense for 7 turns from his first appearance. That 7 turns was probably the worst part of his kit. Like, Dokkan events were starting to get pretty long, so you would see his passive wear out more often than not. And I could see that getting pretty frustrating, since that guy had like no passive at all past 7 turns, and if you weren't able to super with him, he was just dead weight. As for Super Saiyan Goku, yeah, he was good. He raised his attack by 50% on super for 6 turns, and gave tech and type units 2 ki and 25% attack and defense, so a very good support type unit to run on Super Gogeta's team. Strength GT Super Saiyan Goku was probably the worst one out of the bunch. Like, sure, he gave allies 25% attack for 1 turn on super, and had the GT link, which meant you could run him efficiently on Strength percent for Goku's team, but that flat stat buff of 9000 attack and defense was just not enough. Like, without boring you with the calculations, this was equivalent to about 24% attack and defense under 2 Neogods leader. So yeah, not great. Nonetheless, before the end of the month, they teased the next Dokkan Fest, which looked like it was going to be a new Gotenks, physical Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks to be more precise, who got revealed the next day. And if you didn't know, the backlash that unit got was so big that they actually buffed him before release, but we'll talk about that in the next video.